From my first interview with Jim Dunn, February 9th, 2003, to my recent interview with Rear Admiral Jerry Taylor, I've been on an incredible journey the past quarter of a century, and now I find myself back in the great state of Utah.
Larry, I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I've really enjoyed it.
God bless you, brother.
Now you're still looking for some more interviews?
Definitely. I'm recruiting World War II veterans of Omaha Beach in the Utah area right now. I'm here. I'm looking for them across the country, and I'm just very honored to do this for them. This is my tribute to these men. Morning.
Morning, sir.
How are you?
I'm good. Have a good flight.
Thank you.
After 0.2 miles, turn left, Taylor Avenue, then you have reached your destination. It is on your left.
We'll try the home number. Last time I tried calling, I got this too, so. Let's see if anybody's there.
All right.
Good morning, Jerry. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all set for you. You in Salt Lake?
I'm in Ogden. I flew in this morning, got my car rental, everything was on time, and I'm sitting a few blocks down from your house calling you to see if it's okay to come early. We'll turn around. Let's just do it up Brown, right? Larry, Holly, Buddy Holly's brother, West Texas colloquial expression he told me when I interviewed him in 2011 in his home in Lubbock, Texas. That means do it up big. So we're gonna do it up Brown. Okay, here we go. Okay, that says Taylor. We're here. Taylor, I like that. That's a nice looking marker right there. Okay, folks, I'm here. John, I'm here. I'm at your brother's house, and it's cold this morning. Beautiful surroundings here. You can see the mountains out here. It's very nice. Hey there. Is it Jerry Bear Taylor?
Jerry Bear Taylor. Jerry's okay for the day.
Okay.
If you want it.
I'm at the right place.
Yeah, you are in the right place.
And
Thanks for coming.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Come on in. Thank you to my brother for
Yes.
for bringing you.
Thank you for John. Yes. He speaks so highly of you.
Well, I had an opportunity to take him out on a carrier with me.
Oh my goodness. What that would have been an experience, huh?
Yeah, he was.
Hi there.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Hi Pat, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Rear Admiral Jerry Bear Taylor, the Cold War and Vietnam. Welcome, everybody. I've got an extra special program for you today. I just spent 3 hours with Jerry. Flew to Salt Lake City this morning on a Delta Connection jet, no F-16s around, and drove up to here from Salt Lake to Ogden, and I'm in his home right now. And Jerry, I just want to tell you what an honor it has been. Your brother speaks so highly of you. You're his hero. You are one of my guys now. You're my hero, and I've got a special pin I'm going to give you before we're done. Well, you've got a little preview here, folks. Rear Admiral Jerry Baird Taylor, United States Navy, almost over 40 years?
37.
37 years. And I hope you can grab the kids, the grandkids, anybody that you care about to watch this. This is going to be a great interview. Over 2 hours, well over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, one of my longest interviews. And I invite you to invite everybody that you can to watch this. It's going to be great. He'll be on my Voices of History radio station too. I really am grateful to be here today, and we're just going to watch this video now, Jerry. And I want to say God bless you and thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you in my next broadcast.
Well, God bless you too, and thank you for including me in the program. It's been a real pleasure and quite an honor as well.
And the last thing, John Taylor, sir, thank you. Thank you for your help with doing this with your brother.
Thank you, brother.
Story. We love you for it, and it's an honor.
Hear, hear.
It's an honor. I'm going to salute you too. So, all right. Okay. I'm thinking you're looking good. So how old are you now?
91 in 2 weeks.
Man, that's what you said. So did you ever think you'd be that old?
Never. 30 years ago, I was a little worried about dying. And I asked my doctor about how did I look at it after he did the annual physical. He says, "You're going to live to be an old man." And I said, I didn't expect that. And but I'll tell you what, the generous pension plan of the Navy and the medical support that we get is just incredible. And when people say thank you for your service, which I appreciate, what they don't realize is they've made it so smooth for me. Like when I talk about pampered pissants, I'm serious. American people have to realize the billions of dollars they spend on retired military people, because to a man, everybody. And I've been instrumental in helping get a nursing home here in Ogden finally. And now the Veterans Administration is adding veterans homes all over everywhere. And it's not just for veterans, it's for their wives. It's an amazing sacrifice the American people make for their veterans. And I'm all for it, but I don't want them to get greedy. I see a lot of abuse. And
let's go back to high school. Where did you go to high school, and what year did you graduate?
Well, let me go further than that. I was born in Michigan in the middle of the Depression, and the family moved to Ohio, then Pennsylvania, and finally Maryland. And I grew up in Maryland, starting at age 5.
Where in Maryland?
Catonsville. I graduated from Catonsville High School on the west side of Baltimore in Baltimore County. With the class of 1952. We lived kind of poor. Both my parents were partial college, but they had to drop out during the Depression and start to scour for a job. And it was my sister, a year younger than me, Charlotte, and I were the two kids. The family bought a house in Catonsville Manor, and that's where I grew up, dirt road. Half the houses didn't have indoor plumbing. It was take the bike to school, about 1.5 miles or 2 from the schools, and it was a great place to live because it was in the woods. And at one point, when I was about 9, my mom got me a pony, so I had a pony to take care of from 9 to 12 or 13 when I outgrew the pony. But I learned a lot from the pony. In fact, ponies are like airplanes. Airplanes are like ponies. When you cinch up a pony, it bellies up so you can't get the cinch tight, So whenever I approached an airplane in my flying career, I always thought I'm going to outthink the airplane as I pre-flight it. I'm going to cinch it up tight because, like the pony, the airplane would like to kill you. and throw you off and head back for a bag of oats or something. So in any case, I had a pony to prep me for my flying time. And also, at that time, of course, World War II was just a tremendous cost for Americans from long before VD Day. It really started with the Philippines and the Death March, a Bataan thing, and I was 5 years old. But by then, when I lived in Duncannon, Pennsylvania, in September of 1939, I was 4 years old. My mom showed me the paper where the Germans were marching into Poland, and they had horses. There were horses in the war in 1939. And I remember that briefing that my mother gave me at 4, one of my early memories, and they got better and better as the war went on because we were involved in it. My dad didn't go to war, he was too old, and my mom insisted that he not go to war, so she made the supreme sacrifice and said, we're going to have 2 more babies, so I have John and Jeffrey just ahead of him, and as 2 brothers that came along, the 42 and 43. So we had a little 3-bedroom house, 1 bathroom. We were lucky to have the bathroom. And I wasn't a very good scholar in school. I liked drawing, I liked words, and I didn't like numbers, which cost me later on because in those days, living close to Annapolis, my dad figured I was going to go to the Naval Academy. So all during the war, I was more interested in the Navy because we went to all the Navy ball games, including the only Army-Navy game played in Baltimore was 1944. And we got seats to that because FDR said that the crowd, because the Army and Navy were 1-2 in the country. Those days it was Blanchard and Davis for the Army and Smackover Scott for the Navy. And so the president changed the site from the little stadium at Annapolis to the big stadium in Baltimore, but he made a rule. He said you can't drive any more than 10 miles to get there. So the people that buy tickets, because gas was rationed in those days and short for the troops, and this is a few weeks before the Battle of the Bulge. And so it's there's just, if you're going to play games, we're going to play by my rules. So they made tickets available to all of us within 10 miles of the Baltimore Stadium. And so my dad and I got to see the Army whip up on the Navy 27-6 or something like that. So I did see all the Navy ball games. I loved it. I thought seriously about the Naval Academy. I loved seeing the guys in their sailor uniforms. I loved then came the Victory at Sea movies, which made, that was a little later. That's probably in the 50 time frame after the war. But during the war, there were news films with every movie, and my dad wasn't going to war. He had a defense job at one point there, so he was safe from the draft, and so he kept me up to speed on the war, and I decided I want to be a Navy pilot. That looked like the thing to do. And unfortunately, anything beyond algebra was beyond my comprehension. And so I sort of petered out in high school and disappointed my dad, who gave me a lecture that every kid should get after a father sizes up his kid. And my old man, when I was about 12 or 14, something like that, he said, "Son, here's the fact. You got an average brain. And the only way you're going to make it in life is to get up early, stay up late, and work your arse off in the middle." And I didn't hear him till I was 20. When I was out of high school, I was a copy boy after I graduated from high school. with the Baltimore Evening Sun because I had studied words instead of numbers, and had been the sports editor of the high school newspaper. And so I had my own column from the time I was 12 years old to 16 or so with the community newspaper. I'd go door to door and get news from the families, and I'd sell subscriptions to the newspaper. I made $5 a month and turned out 4 little short columns of copy from Miss Marie O'Day at the Herald Argus in Catonsville, Maryland. And so I had this, my mother had done this to me. She had dumped me out and told me to get a job. And so I had that job, and I picked up golf balls, and I did a lot of things at a driving range. I ran a putt-putt golf course coming through high school, and I wasn't a real athlete. I was a little small. My mom had started me off in school at age 5 by changing my birth certificate. So I was a year younger going through, and so I finished up high school at 17. And I went to the Baltimore Evening Sun and said I need a job, and they said, how about copy boy, which was ideal for me. There were people from the Depression era that didn't have a full college that were entering the newspaper business. And so I started working for $1 an hour, 40 hours a week as a copy boy, and I really enjoyed it. The last part of it, they put me in the sports department, working for the sports editor, Paul Menton, his copy boy. And so I learned the newspaper business, and then I also had an opportunity to sit down and take phone calls from people that had little stories. And so I'd sneak some stories in every once in a while, which was above my pay grade, but it was fun anyway. The World Series of 1952 came along shortly after I graduated from high school. I was going to school at Johns Hopkins at night, taking courses in writing and speech and stuff like that. So I wasn't totally out of the academics world. I was working on becoming the president of the United States the hard way, I guess. And in the World Series of 1952 rolled around, I was sitting there in the sports department at Baltimore Sun, and the New York Daily News had every year they had a World Series contest, and it ended a month before the World Series started, and you had to pick not only the winners, the participants in the World Series, but also you had to pick the scores of the games, and the top prize was $25,000, and I'm sorry, not $5,000, and second prize was $2,500, and you could enter one time. So the papers came into our newspaper, and my job was to sort them out for the writers all around me. And but they weren't interested in these entries to the contest, so I lined up one for me, one for my father, and one for each of my brothers. And I just I decided some of them were Brooklyn and the Yankees, some of them were Cleveland and Brooklyn. And I just made up the numbers for the ball games, and see, God's watching. He's watching me. So, in any case, I don't think about that. I enter them as 4 separate entries, and I don't think about anything till the World Series is starting. And it just happened that the day I only made a copy of one of those entries. And I pulled out this entry on the first day of the World Series that says the Yankees beat Brooklyn 4-2. I said, holy mackerel, that's what I got, Brooklyn and the Yankees. So there I am in the Baltimore Evening Sun newsroom, and everybody's getting interested in listening to the World Series on the radio while they're doing work. And I said, you don't have to listen. The Yankees are going to win 4-2. Yeah. But they won 4-2. And I had worked it out. New York wins 1, 3, 5, and 7, and Brooklyn wins the ones in between. I picked all the scores. When we were all done, by that time, everybody in the Baltimore Sun papers knew that there was a copy boy up in the sports department that was he was not just picking winners, he's picking scores. Because I missed one ball game by 1 run and one ball game by 2 runs. Incredible. The last game was also a 4-2 Yankees win. And Billy Martin raced in to catch a ball that would have changed that. But in any case, again, I don't think too much about it, but everybody was saying, boy, that guy, you hear about Taylor up in the sports department? And about a week or two after the World Series, my mother called and said, Jerry, you got to come home. There's a big check here for you. And it's made out to Jeff, my brother Jeff. And I got off work and I went home. We got Jeff, and he was in about the 5th grade or something like that. We had to go up and get him to sign that check, and I gave him a $40 payment for his signature, and I had the rest of the $2,500 to put me through 2 years of college without working full time. So that was how I got my college, and that's indicative of the good fortune I've had, thank you God, all the way through. It just works out that fate is the future, and God is fate, and so we were a good religious family. We went to the nearest church all the time, so I had a little bit of Methodist, a little bit of Catholic. I went with my friends to Catholic school. We went, but we narrowed in on Presbyterian, and that's what I got married and all that stuff. So, in any case, I was saying my prayers and all of that. I was a camp counselor for the YMCA when I was at the University of Maryland, which was what I switched to with my money. And I bought 2 years of college, $2,500. And I worked. I every weekend I'd go into Baltimore, catch the Greyhound bus for 60 cents, 35 miles from College Park to the Lexington garage. And I parked cars. And I made 50 cents an hour and tips. And I only wrecked one car in all the summers. So I was working when I was in school. I would just spend the weekends parking cars, and then the Saturday night I spent at home so my mom could do my laundry. And then I'd get back to Sunday parking cars and catch the bus out of Baltimore back to school. And I had an interesting life, I'll say that, just man over machine, which is what life is all about. Life, the machines come with skirts on them, for instance. The machines come as animals, whether everything is, I look at everything as a machine. And the man there's something in your body that says, I can control that. Well, you find out you can't control anything with skirts or pants, really. But that's what you have to do with a horse. That's what you have to do with an airplane. And if you can't control it, then it's going to get you in a lot of trouble. And so it just holds up. Just the spirit. When I look at athletes and ex-sports guys and the rest of it, they want to explore their limits and in control of a ball or whatever it is. And so in my case, it turned out to be airplanes. Aren't you lucky? And so I didn't have very good luck with women, but that's okay. I learned how to be controlled, and that things get good when you realize the truth of the matter is the man has his limits. So, in any case, 2 years at the University of Maryland, I was, again, sports editor of the Wednesday edition of the Diamondback. But after 2 great years there as a Lambda Chi Alpha and beer and girls and a little bit of academics, I didn't have a very good grade point average. I'd be embarrassed to tell you what it is, but it was better than a C average, so a 2.0, which is the minimum for applying for the Naval Aviation Cadets. So off to, I went down and out of money after 2 years with my 2.0, and I took all the tests and passed all the tests. Two-hour tests was all it took for the Navy. I'd taken the Air Force ones because I was in Air Force ROTC at Maryland, and they took 9 hours for their testing, and I took that the week before I took the Navy tests, and the Navy tests were only a couple hours. So I aced the Navy tests because of the prep from the Air Force. So thank you, Jesus. So in any case, in September of '55, I went off to be an E1 in the United States Navy, making $90 a month, $98 a month, something like that. And as a Naval Aviation Cadet, coming in Pensacola, class 3455, survived that as a 3-bar. We had ranks in little bars. I was an adjutant or something like that at pre-flight. Then I was a company commander or something in the first stages of flying at Whiting Field. But in any case, that was my occupation then, was to master the airplanes, to become a fighter pilot, a carrier fighter pilot. And I didn't have any real difficulty passing through. It was from in March 1, 1957, they had a commissioning thing, and I was got my little gold bar and my gold wings, brass bar and gold wings, and then I finished up in the Panther in flight training, which was the plane from Bridges at Toko-Ri, which had been a motivator for me while I was at the University of Maryland. And flying the Panther was a really, really fun thing, because for the first time I was in an airplane with one cockpit, one engine, one cockpit. And I carrier qualified in SNJ before I went down there, so my first carrier landings were out of Barron Field. At that time, John Wayne was filming one of his flying things, and I remember that timing very well, because Maureen O'Hara was in that movie. I can't remember the name of it, but Spigweed or somebody like that was a test pilot, and he flew through a hangar at Barron Field while I was there. So in any case, I'd mastered the airplane, done okay. Then the problem is, where do you get a seat in the fleet? Because as luck would have it, there were things happening in the world which opened up opportunities for pilots who wanted to deliver nuclear weapons. And so after a tour as a flight instructor to beef up my flight hours, teaching kids how to fly the T-28, which is an awesome airplane. It's a powerful little airplane. It even went to war in Vietnam. I mean, they're still flying around somewhere, I'm sure. And I got probably 1,000 hours in the T-28 in a year of, it's now maybe a little short of that. But in any case, I was a second tour student while I was an instructor. I turned out 13 great students over the period of time for a year and a half. And then I've been a reserve. As a cadet, you get commissioned as a reserve officer. But I applied for and was accepted as a regular officer based on one or two of my report cards, fitness reports, which surprised a lot of people who had already been out to the fleet and come back. But I was a hustler when I was an instructor, and the criteria for instructor of the month was who could fly the most hours with students. Everybody else had 3 students. I had 5 students all the time, and they all got they all passed check rides and the rest of it. So I was doing things right, and I scored well as a flight instructor, and then I got assigned to A4 Skyhawks with the Atlantic Fleet. And I had to go through school essentially to deliver nuclear weapons. In the early 50s, there was a big contest between the Air Force and the Navy who was going to be the strategic arm for the standoff in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, ready to swap it. And so it was the same old fight that goes on now, big bombers or carriers. If we can't afford one, which would you choose? And so the Navy was hustling, trying to figure out how they were going to get a piece of the nuclear warfare action or get left behind. And this is before the Navy had the nuclear boats. The missiles weren't there yet for the submarines to fire. Our nuclear weapons were bombs. And so the Navy had to design a couple of airplanes that could deliver, at that time frame, a pretty fat bomb, the Mark 7, or a little bit thinner one called the Mark 28. And we had all the capability of up to and including 1.1 megaton weapons. And so I was trained as a loading officer. I knew the innards of the bombs, and then as a delivery pilot. So all the A4 pilots trained not only for conventional weapon delivery like we used in Vietnam, but also for the nuclear weapons. And so through the early 60s, we were trained and ready to go. And at one point during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, October, I was in the Mediterranean on the USS Forrestal as a lieutenant, and I was sitting on a live bomb when we were at DEFCON 3, waiting to go to 4 and launch. And what they had devised for the Cold War was a strategic integrated operation plan that put the Air Force and the Navy, all of our airplanes going to the beach in sequence so we didn't put a bomb down on the checkpoint. Was an A4 pilot flew through. I don't know how they did that. I figured if I launched on that thing, I wasn't probably coming back to the ship because I didn't think the ship would be there. But in any case, also fuel was a problem. But probably shouldn't mention this, but anyway, one of my targets was a little airport near Odessa. And so when the balloon went up, the idea was we would disable all the areas around the edge because the A4 was sort of limited in its range to 600 or 700 miles, so I could get home. But I figured after that mission I was going to bail out in Montenegro or somewhere and then see if I could survive with a link up with the Patriots or something. But in any case, that period was very successful. Again, I got a lot of carrier landings. I got a lot of good officer experience. I had great white hats working for me that I was leading. And I was showing up at captain's mast as often as the captain was with all my when I had the line division, which is kids that are kind of like plane captains on the airplanes there. And so a couple of plane captains and on each one, and they haul the tie down chains around and pre-flight the reservoirs and things like that. And you get real close to them, and if you're the line division officer, you have about 30 of those guys because your squadron has 12 airplanes normally. And when you're all done, you got a line division with 25, 30 people, including a couple of petty officers. But you got all the knuckleheads that don't know how to go on liberty and stay sober, and they just go to have fun, and they get in trouble. So I had a real leadership problem. But in fact, let me tell you a funny story there. There was a catapult officer on the Roosevelt that also had the problem with his young sailors. And so you always went to captain's mast, which is a non-judicial punishment where they bust you or they take some money away from you or restrict you to the ship and that kind of thing. The captain has his table of punishments that he metes out depending on the severity of the if you got into a fight, you were going to get a whole bunch. And if you just got drunk and were late getting back or something, that would cost you something. But in any case, the division officer always had to go down and stand there with his sailor at captain's mast. So I rarely missed a captain's mast because I had great troops, and they worked hard and they played hard. Well, so also did the catapult officer, Billy Wheat. And one day I was down at the captain's mast on the Roosevelt with Billy. I said, Billy, it's you and me making all these captain's masts, but I haven't seen you lately. What did you do to get your troops under control? I feel all alone now that you aren't coming to captain's mast. He says, well, I got a killer. What do you mean? He said, well, I got a little void up there between the catapults, and when I get a sailor that has does something bad, I throw him in that void with the killer, and that killer gives him 15 or 20 minutes of pounding, and he comes out of there, and he's a new sailor. I said, I don't think I'm going to go that route, but Billy Wheat had the problem solved. In any case, it was a great junior officer tour with tours in the Mediterranean. In those days, we had to wear coat and tie when we went ashore, and we took our cameras, 35 millimeter cameras, and we made all the ports in the Mediterranean that the cruise ships make now, and that was see the world, and it was all part of President Eisenhower's people-to-people program he had during those early years of the Cold War, where we were having an opportunity to show the Spanish and the French and the Italians and the Greeks and everybody in the Mediterranean, and they had a chance to show us the greatest ruins in the world, dating back from the Romans and the Greeks to the World War II ruins that were still there in Palermo when I went ashore in late 1959-60 time frame. And we exercised with all the NATO fleets, and so I got to be a proficient carrier pilot doing exactly what I wanted to do, except we didn't have any combat, which is what you're ready for, you train for. The way you train is the way you fight. So there wasn't we were deterring war. That's what power does. You don't want to get into a war, but you got to be ready to go to war because that's what deters, and that's the best thing you can do for peace is just be powerful. Be the top dog, the bully in the neighborhood. That's kind of what the president's trying to be right now in our current day. But I worry about the size of our military to do it. I think he does too, looking at what the current budget is. But in any case, we were powerful in those days. But so it was a eye to eye looking the Russian in the eye. And everywhere we went in the carrier, we had, through the early 60s, a Russian trawler was out there somewhere on the horizon keeping track of us. Mm-hmm. And so we performed our mission, simulated our mission to show the Soviet Union that we were ready to go on a moment's notice. And you guys have to understand the carrier is a part of the action, and then we held up our share of the Strategic Integrated Operation Plan. And that went on all the way into the Vietnam War. We still had nukes on the carriers and nuclear weapons loading officers and pilots ready to fly a different range of targets to support activity in the Pacific Fleet. And it was pretty important. You had to brief your target to the intelligence people regularly. You planned your target, low-level attack, pop up, loft a bomb so you could have safe separation time to get away. It was serious business, and we got so, in those days, we could put a bomb within 100 feet off and then be 8 miles away when it went off. And I suspect we'd have been swallowed up in either the electromagnetic wave that followed or something. I don't know. I think years later, I know they added a closed canopy so that as you flew this mission, you closed this shield so that you could see instruments and weren't blinded by the action. So it was a great profession. We participated in the Cold War forever and ever. We made sacrifices. We made short notice cruises every time there was a fight anywhere, because everybody said the dominoes are going to fall if the communists get in there. So we were down for things in the Dominican Republic. We were down for things in Cuba. I flew missions guarding the fence on the celebration of when Fidel Castro was there. We had a active force of airplanes down there, and so everybody got to take a turn being the ready requirement to meet the Cubans coming through the gates at Guantanamo. So every attack pilot and got some duty down there out of Guantanamo's airport and spend their night drinking rum goodies. It was good duty down there. It was good flying, and we supported ships coming down to go through refresher training. So just the flying was great. I mean, it was man over machine, just mastering all these weapons deliveries. We strafed, we shot rockets, we dropped bombs off of dive bombing at different angles and throwing bombs for practicing the nuke trade. So it was, we were jack of all trades. I wasn't a fighter pilot, I was an attack pilot. We had F-8s and we had Demons and we had F-3Hs they were. We had FJs when I started flying. I was A4 all the way through that phase into the early '60s. So that was all out of Cecil Field, Jacksonville, and I had a family then. I had 2 babies, and one of the other things I did, Larry, was I saw where I saw the track for Admiral, but I didn't want to be an Admiral. I just wanted to be an Air Wing commander, to be the top dog of an Air Wing with 7, 9 different squadrons of 20 pilots each, and total manning of about 2,500 troops. And you would get assigned to a carrier, and you would be the top aviator on the carrier. I saw that and I said, and in my day, all of those guys that were Air Wing commanders were all guys who were real heroes in World War II. They were like Art Hawkins was, I was a public information officer in my squadron, 1st Squadron, and he was the Air Wing commander, and I got his biography, and he had a whole row of distinguished flying crosses to go with his Navy Cross and all of that stuff for shooting down 13 or 20 airplanes and dive bombing on carriers and everything. So these were real heroes that were our leaders, and that's what I wanted to be. I want to be one of them. How do you do that? Well, you're not going to do it without a college degree. You're not going to do it without a bunch of carrier landings and carrier experience and filling in the kind of like I use that apprentice and journeyman and master levels, which you see in life. You got to start somewhere, and then if you're motivated and you demonstrate performance proven potential, then you move up. And so like I say, my old man said you got an average brain, and I knew it was limited in the area of I wasn't going to get calculus and trig and into difficult things. I did love physics, but physics at my level was, you could handle that with calculus. So in any case, I finished up my first tour in a squadron in February of 1963. Picked up my wife and two babies who were living with their parents in Baltimore. And they'd been hiding there during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They moved from Jacksonville up there because Jacksonville was within the range of the missiles that were supposed to be in Cuba. So in any case, I left them at home when I went on that cruise. And then I got relieved a couple months early so I could make a March date at the Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey. And so the next 2 years were academics. They were years where things were turning to worms in a lot of parts of the world, including the Southeast Asia. And sitting in there and pursuing a baccalaureate in the foreign policy and stuff like that, I was studying the war before I got there, and the causes and all the rest of that, and writing papers about the Buddhists that were burning themselves, self-immolation, and the assassination of Kennedy and by Kennedy and the CIA of Jim and No, or the leadership down there. There's a lesson there, you know. Everybody, why do we go to Vietnam? And the fact of the matter is, to understand Vietnam, you have to start with the French in coming out of World War II and their experience at Dien Bien Phu. And Eisenhower is supporting with as much as the military could provide. But we were all peeling back in the United States at that time. But we did support the forces against Ho Chi Minh. They had a Geneva Accord which divided the Vietnam Peninsula at the 17th parallel and said, you guys want to go this way, you guys want to go that way. Well, as soon as the world started to focus other places, Ho Chi Minh said, I'm going to unite all of Vietnam the way it belongs, the way it is today. And so that was a hard choice for the United States. Are we going to get in there and stand in the way of this guy who will take freedom and democracy away from the people in the South that want it, or are we going to give them support? Think about that. Today, we're in Iranians. They want democracy. And the hierarchy says, no, we're going to live with the authoritarianism of the Islamic group. And so our president today has the same problem, I think, that Eisenhower had back there in that 61, 62 time frame. So we decided to go ahead and support, and when I was at Monterey, I had to live in a cottage rented in downtown on the on the southern edge of Monterey. Any case, the other people that were living in these little cottages were going to the Defense Language Institute. And they were my friends off duty. They were Green Berets. And they were the guys learning the language at the language thing as the final bit before they deployed to Southeast Asia. So even while I was in school, I was immersed in the early era of the Vietnam War, watching what was going on. And all of a sudden we had carriers over there, and guys I knew were going to war, and I was just breathing heavy. I was afraid the war would end before I got a chance to find out who I am. That's what that's all about. You got to find out if you got the guts to be one of them. Because every time you roll in, there's people shooting at you. Do you have the courage to press your attack into those guns? Not just this morning, but this morning and this evening. You're going to get 2 ops today. And then tomorrow you're going to do it again, and the day after that, and the day after that. You're going to do it for 25 days in a row. You're going to go out there and look down the guns of that are down there. And you have to harden up. We'll get to that. But in any case, I didn't make the cut. I didn't get to the war. So I had to get my baccalaureate degree, and then I was in a class of about 20 guys, and they came and they read off the orders. Everybody got orders where they wanted to go except me and one other guy. One other guy got orders to an aide for an admiral, and I said, well, how come? And I got orders to be an instructor at the training squadron for A4 pilots for the Pacific Fleet, because I had so much A4 time, and I needed to brush up on that. I'd have had to go there anyway to get ready to go to war. So I was not unhappy about my orders, except it meant another delay. But the war was getting worser and worser and worser. So I was satisfied there'd be plenty of war for me. I was a little disappointed as an instructor there because I had a national defense ribbon. That's all I had as a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant commander with 1 ribbon. The Navy doesn't do ribbons the way the Air Force and the Army do, but 1 ribbon. And I trained young kids come out as ensigns or Lieutenant JGs out of the Flight Training Command to learn to fly the A4, and I'd be there as an instructor at VA 125 at Lemoore. And the young kid would learn how to fly his airplane, how to navigate his airplane, how to fire some weapons off it, and then they'd send him out or I'd go out with him as often as I could volunteer to do it, so I could get some carrier landings too, because carrier landings are a measure of your operational expertise. And so bagging landings is important as an indicator of how serious you are in being a leader in naval aviation. In any case, I was shocked. I had an inferior complex because I would train those ensigns. They go out there for 6 months and get shot at 100, 150 times, and they'd come back and they'd have 3 rows of ribbons. And that's the way the world is. You got to, except if they just give out trophies to everybody, which is not fair. You shouldn't be passing out ribbons all over everywhere, but that's what the new generations expect. That's why you see kids with rows of ribbons this tall that don't mean anything. For instance, just right now, the guys that are down on the border with Mexico get the same ribbon that the guys that went to Mexico when they were shooting during Patton's period. They get the same ribbon to wear, even though they're only down there for a few months and there's no shooting. Give me a break. For distinguished flying crosses, they passed out distinguished flying crosses to everybody who was in the logistics force that pulled out all the people from the Afghanistan airport. Now, who got shot at? Who was really heroic? And they did this by the dozens and dozens of DFCs, which leaves an old guy like me wondering, how come I had over 200 missions over North Vietnam, and I had one spectacular mission where I was recommended for a Silver Star and it came back a DFC. But all my wingmen that were better bombers than me, for heaven, some of them, they flew 200 of these missions and they didn't get a single doggone DFC. So I mean, they come home and they say, you want to welcome me home? Would you give me my damn ribbon? It's Napoleon that said it is with ribbons, a bit of ribbon that men are led. And so we stepped on all our junior officers over there, or too many of them. I just don't understand that. But that's why they give out so many bits of ribbon now, is that they keep that retention rate up, is give them recognition for what they're doing. And unfortunately, they've delved into the medals that require valor. I mean, real valor. And so I think probably the guys that went ashore at D-Day, the guys that did the Bataan Death March, the guys that actually lose a limb, the guys that bleed for our country, the guys that get a Purple Heart, and the rest of those guys, they deserve everything they get, because that just means they came close to not getting anything, because they'd be buried, they'd be lost, they'd be gone. And so my day came finally to go flying with the real Navy, the tip of the spear with my little A4 over there, and stick it right out there. And I was now a lieutenant commander. I had a lot of hours, so I led everything. And I was in my element. But would I be able to keep going when they were shooting at me? Piece of cake if you got God flying with you. And a wife that understands you might not come home. So every day for 6 months, from December of '66 to July of '67, I flew about 100 missions over North Vietnam, the air war, which was Rolling Thunder. So that's why I remember Rolling Thunder in my blog. And I do that because we left 3 pilots over there from my squadron, and a POW who was in there. Bob Norton was there for nearly 6 years, I guess. Yeah, so there was one squadron where they put a really nice film on. It's the story of Dick Perry wrote that thing. And I can't remember the name of the title of it. Everybody should watch. It's on the internet, and it's Jesse. Jesse was a gambler in Las Vegas who fell in love with Navy pilots and Air Force pilots going through, and particularly this squadron. So they painted Miss Jessie on the side of an A4, and that squadron put out a little tape in the end that really shows the kind of film you're doing here on those guys, and they said it for all of us. We felt like dead men walking. Particularly on their ship, which was the Oriskany, which took 3 times as many casualties as our ship did. But there were three kinds of carriers out there: little, medium, and large. And the little ships only had A4s and F8s on them, basically, and they had 3 squadrons of A4s instead of the other 2 would be 2 squadrons of A4s and a squadron of A6s, which was medium attack. And medium attack is different from light attack. Light attack is basically VFR, dive bombing from altitude, coming down through the firing, and you control your pickle point to the point where you're on the right dive angle, you're on the right speed, you're tracking it, you got the wind moving your pipper in closer to the release point that you picked that is offset for the best wind information you have. This is all calculation in the attack pilot's mind as he's coming down through this very vulnerable section of maybe 5 seconds where you're a grape. Because at this point, there's no jinking, there's no moving. They knew you were going to be up here because the bridge goes like this, and they know you're not going to bomb across it with string of bombs. They know you're going to come down this way, so you cut the bridge a little bit this way and that way, and if your bombs are off a little bit, you'll still get one in there. And we drop 5 or 6 500-pounders at a time. So they know where you're going to be, at what altitude, and about what dive angle. They've seen it all, and they're just waiting for you for this 5 or 6 seconds so you can fly down. 75% of all the airplanes got nailed that we lost, and we lost 1,000 airplanes up there. 1,000. I mean, we lost more airplanes, counting helicopters, than we got in our inventory today. So in any case, you come through this, and then you do, after a while, you realize I'm a dead man walking. Then you say, as you roll in, you say, here I go, God. Come on with me. Help me. They put a monitor, heart monitor, on some guys flying my business and for the war, and they also put it on there for the same guys for the night carrier landings. It turns out the heart beats harder for the night carrier landing than it does being shot at. As hard as you're working to fly that ball, you're also to get aboard ship at night, which is probably the most challenging evolution in aviation today. I wait for somebody to challenge me on that, but I think night carrier landings, particularly when the deck is moving, and sometimes it's out of sync with what you're doing, and you just have to ignore it and let the landing signal officer or safety officer down there tell you whether he's going to let you come aboard or not, because if the ship dips, the bow comes up and the stern goes down, then you're exceeding the landing. The landing coming aboard goes from acceptable 3 degrees to something greater, and the airplane will bust. Or conversely, if the stern comes up, then you got this hook to tail clearance that's a problem. But you also have the problem of going for a deck that's going down toward the water, and if you bolter, you fly over the cables, now you're flying right at the water, and you don't have a lot of extra speed. So, in any case, that's why I included that thing from George Will in there. George Will understood that and really stated it well, that there is, as you sleep comfortably at home tonight, know there's guys out there literally defying death for an occupation, for you, for showing the readiness to carry to project the power of the United States to a target that requires killing. And so...
Yeah, I read that, and I appreciated that. I want to share that with some people, but I got to ask, I haven't asked you any questions, so I got 1,000 of them. No, you're doing great. Just remember where we're at in the story, but since you mentioned George, tell me about a night carrier landing. I mean, just take me in what you're doing and what you're seeing and how fast it is, and tell me about it.
Okay, well, the night carrier landing is the most challenging thing, and it starts with the stack at Marshall, just like all airplanes go into a holding pattern. And while the carrier's down there launching the next bunch of airplanes on a mission, that's the launch, and then there's the recovery. And so the ship comes into the wind and launches. Now, 20 miles behind the carrier is the stack, or thereabouts. And everybody, individually or section, but most individually at night, is the way you do it now. We didn't in the beginning. We used to have formations up there, and then you'd peel off 1 minute around, 2 minutes. But thing is, the wingman would end up doing this immediately after flying wing. It had a lot of vertigo problems. So having a stack of airplanes is better than having formations separating up there, because when you leave Marshall at 20 grand, you're at 250 knots, and you start the same kind of penetration that an airliner does coming out of a holding pattern or whatever. And you're going to go through the same evolution of putting the flaps down, the gear down, and everything is according, and you're flying a needle. The TACAN needle tells you where you're going to be. I mean, the airplane's on the head of the needle. I'm sorry, the carrier's on the head of the needle, and all the lights are out except for a little bit of the landing area and the landing mirror, which I have on tape. I'll show you what that's all about. A very good slide of that. And the mirror is, we call it a ball, but it's just a set of mirrors. And when you put the ball between the green datum lines, and that's on glide slope. So you're shooting to come out of this penetration and approach, so that at about a mile and a half at 600 feet, you're going to pick up a ball that's between those two green datum lines. If it's high, then you use a little power, come down, catch it, and you hold the ball between the green. If it slips down one, then you add a little power, and that'll put you up. You take the power back off, so you're maintaining the ball. Then you have in the cockpit an angle of attack. We didn't have it until we had it in the war. And the angle of attack is your airspeed. So you don't have to, as we did in the early days in the Mediterranean cruise time frame, we didn't have an angle of attack. We had to calculate our fuel load and pick out an airspeed and put the little bug over there. But our scan had to come down in the cockpit to check our airspeed. So what we did in the Navy to make it better was put the angle of attack indicator up here, which is a little inverted V for too fast and, too slow, and a yellow ball that's on speed. And so you're playing, when you add power, that's going to probably put you to fast. So you got to come a little nose down, and you learn to play all these things. And then the other thing is lineup. Now the ship is into the wind, but the deck is 10 degrees off. So there's the crotch between the angled deck. So you have a little crab on your airplane to come between to fly the center line of the runway and deal with the wind that's coming down the deck this way. So you have to have about 30 knots of wind to operate the deck. You can get down to 25 or go up more than that, but that's everything is premised on a 30-knot speed, a 30-knot wind speed. So on the bridge of the ship, they're dealing with getting the wind down the deck, very important, and then a lot of times there's no wind out there, so they're looking for it. And I mean, you could be in an approach, and they'll be changing it to try and get as much wind as they can, so that the arresting gear that's set for a specific weight on an airplane is to catch it at a certain airspeed is going to be within limits. So, any case, you have four things. You have God sitting here. Yeah. Talking to you or listening, mostly listening. Although people have said, that God sees the ball, he says, a little more power, Jer. So in any case, you got this lineup, you got your airspeed, and you got that ball. It's you, God, and the meatball coming down out of the black through the clouds with that needle, and all of a sudden you've got this ball at 600 feet. You don't go below 600 feet without a ball. People have done that. They've just gone in the water behind a ship. And so you come down and you play your angle a little bit, you get in there, and now you're jockeying the power a little as you're playing with the nose and playing a little aileron to get it just right. And it's a highly competitive business. The LSO's down there grading every landing. He's there for safety, but he's also going to give you a grade on your landing. And this is another separator of the men from the boys. The guys who come aboard lickety split, OK3, 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 or slight variation, fair 3, fair 3. And a really wild landing would be a cut pass. That would be a red pass. So in the ready room, you'll have every ready room in the Navy, you'll have a landing board that has a CO at the top on down to the junior aviator. And every landing that he makes on a cruise is on that board. And you go for greenies. And can you get a stack of greenies in a row where your deviations from the glide slope and the center line and airspeed control are all right there every time. And there's some guys that just absolutely are so smooth and slick with the stick right there that they come aboard with OK3s. Now, a couple things happen. The deck is moving. You just fly the ball, or else the LSO say, you're steady now, and the ball's moving up and down. Instead of, the deck is moving, and this thing is stabilized, supposedly, but it's moving, and the LSO will tell you, don't fly the ball, fly, keep it, you're good, you're doing good, and then you don't go down to get the ball, or you don't pull up to get don't make any correction to change the ball. The ball comes up all by itself because that's the deck moving, and so it's moving a little, and then when the deck is moving, it's tense time. Mm-hmm. But in my career, with I think it's a little over 200 night carrier landings in my 1,000 plus, and of those, let's say 200 night carrier landings, I don't think I've had any more than maybe about 10 or 15 that were really sweaty. The other thing about night carrier landings is the more you get, the better you get. The less apprehensive you are. So, as is true with everything in life, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so that's one of the reasons why this business is expensive. There's a lot of training that goes into it. And unlike the first A4s that I flew, it was the cost for an hour of flight time for gas and oil was $60 for an hour of flight time. Now it's up in the thousands. So everything it's an expensive business, and it's something the taxpayer has to be ready to pay for in order for us to have aircraft carriers ready to go. And we've got, in those days we had 15 big decks and about as many other kinds of carrier decks. And we had about twice as many squadrons then as we have now, because we're down to, I think, 10 big carriers now, all nuke. And that's another story how I got command of a carrier. But in any case, that's the night landing is much of what you've flown in an airliner. It's a straight in kind of approach with checkpoints along the way, and you call those checkpoints off at 12 miles. At 10 miles. I can't remember now. Maybe it's 6 miles. You're at 1,200 feet, and you start down, and you about the time you hit 600 feet, you're at 1.5 miles, and then it's 500 feet, 1.25 miles, 400 feet, a mile, 300 feet, 200 feet, 100 feet, and you're aboard.
But when you see video of it, it's happened so fast, and there's no margin for error.
The margin for error is 15 feet of hook to ramp clearance for that 3-degree glide slope, which messes up when the ship's moving. But it's if you're flying the ball, you're where you're supposed to be. If you aren't, then you're getting the safety officer on the landing signal officer's getting antsy.
How many seconds does it take you to actually come to stop once you hit the deck?
2 or 3 at the most.
Seconds?
Yeah, but bing, bing. I mean, you snap up that cable and it puts you down on the nose and it throws you ahead. I flew with bruises right here from the coke fittings on my parachute and seat straps, and like that. As soon as you feel that, you snap the power off, and the cable will pull you back real quick. And as soon as you, in the A4, as soon as you pull the power off, you give it 1, 2, 3, and then you put it back on as you mash your right brake, and that turns you this way and cocks you this way. And so then you can taxi clear of the gear, and now you catch an airplane every, you could do 60 seconds, but to make sure somebody doesn't die in the gear, you usually shoot for about 90 seconds between aircraft.
And all your flying, did you ever see somebody crash on the deck or on takeoff?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me one you remember. Tell me what happened.
Well, most of the crashes go back to the Mediterranean time frame. We took aviation, naval aviation. I got a job because in 1955, the Navy killed hundreds of aviators. They lost, I think there were 600 crashes because the Navy at that time frame was coming out of World War II. And everybody that was making airplanes during World War II wanted to keep making airplanes after the war. And it took a while to get it down to which ones you were going to stay with. So like I said, when I went out in the A4, the fighter guys had F-8s, F-4D Skyrays, F-3H Demons, FJ Furies. Banshees were still flying. Cougars and Panthers were still. Everybody wanted a piece of the action, and what the Navy had, and because there were so many, and they didn't have training facilities like they developed. The standardization was very difficult. So, and we had all these prop flying airplanes. The pilots flew props at some speed, doubled or whatever, for the jets, and so we had people transitioning that got all these bad habits flying props, trying to do it in jets, and it wasn't working. And so the variety of airplanes and the maintenance mistakes and the rest, it was a dangerous business.
But tell me about a particular crash. What happened? Did you get killed?
Okay.
What happened?
Terry Cryway was flying an F-8 Crusader, and we were on a North Atlantic cruise, and he came, as I recall, and he came around and the deck was moving a little bit, and he got low, and he planted it on the stern of the ship. And the thing blew up and all the rest of that. Terry knew that he was in deep trouble, and he ejected at about the time the airplane slid over everything and went off in a big ball of flame, and out popped Terry Cryway, and he's in the water, and the helicopter goes and gets him. We had one of the things that happens in carrier aviation is a bad cat shot. The catapults have gone from hydraulic to steam to electric over the years, and there's a learning curve for each one of them, I guess. Hydraulic was my early ones on Shangri-La and other places. I flew off of a dozen different carriers. In any case, the hydraulics where you went from 0 to 120 or more knots right here. You got everything the catapult had. Whereas in steam cats, you got this graduated thing. So you have to get used to the steam cat for after all your hydraulic cats. You're not going to get that same thing. But things happen where, for instance, something comes out of the instrument panel, it comes back on the stick. Or you lose all your lights for a night cat shot. I always had a Boy Scout flashlight here. I always had my flashlight on, so if I lost my lights on a cat shot where I went off the bow, didn't have a lot of end speed above stall, you have to climb out of the hole after the cat shot. You'll notice a lot of airplanes do a little sink after there. You got to rotate to get it up. Well, at night it's blacker than inside of a skunk out there. So it's if your lights go out, what am I doing? And you pull it up too much, you'll go in the water. And a lot of guys go in the water. I did in those days.
Were anybody killed during those times?
Oh yeah, but there was Gary Offerman was a young photo pilot in my air wing in the 1961 time frame, and Gary had a midair over Jacksonville coming home from Guantanamo, and his airplane was engulfed in flames. So Gary survived, but he took a lot of burns on his face and hands, and he was a pretty ugly-looking guy. We loved him, but he was ugly. And you get over that. That's a part of he earned those badges. Any case, Gary got back to flying, and Gary got a cold cat shot, which just didn't give him enough to fly. So he ejected ahead of the airplane, and I was in the ready room, aft on the ship, next to the catwalk, and they said, "Man in the water, pilot, plane in the water," and I knew we were in cat shots because you can always hear the cats going and the arresting gear going. You know where we are. So I ran out to the edge of the catwalk, and I looked down, and Gary's in the water with his parachute, and that's the last we saw of Gary. He went down with his parachute. The reason he went down with his parachute, I contend, is because I saw he had his leather gloves on. Well, the reason he had his gloves on because he got burned once. So he flew with gloves on all the time, which I said, you don't want to do that. You want to have the feel. You can't be man over beast with something on this any more than you can. But you got to have that flesh to flesh. So in any case, Gary goes down with his chute because I think he couldn't get these coke fittings done. There was with the leather gloves. I ended up showing a demonstration in the ready room to my executive officer. I said, I'm not flying with gloves anymore. He says, you're going to fly with gloves because the book says you fly with gloves. I said, well, let me show you a demonstration. Get your gear on, XO, and put your gloves on, and then put these gloves on. They're wet. I had a bucket of water, and he put his gloves on. He had a hell of a time with the coke fittings. He says, you're going to fly with your gloves. So whenever I was chance of being filmed, like on the before you salute and all that, well, I didn't have my gloves. I didn't have my gloves fully on, and when I came down, I'd take my glove off that was up there for the salute to take the cat shot, because I knew the XO would be watching me, to make sure I was compliant with his rules. Well, I don't know that anybody ever. The gloves changed for the war to a no-mix material with a lot. They work better, and so flying with the gloves was a wise idea. But I just had the Gary Offerman experience in my bag of memories. And let's see, we had an XO of the squadron that was we had a firepower demonstration. We run a lot of visitors out to the carrier, and then we put on a little show, 20-minute show with all the airplanes doing a trick or two, and the XO went out there to drop bombs on we tow a sled in the water, which throws up a turkey of water and turkey tail, and so you bomb the sled in the water, and he was bombing that, and unfortunately they used some old World War II bombs. Nobody had checked to see what the limitations were, and he was going a little too fast in his dive, when the bombs came off, they ripped up the fuselage and ultimately caused a fire. So for the firepower demo, we had our executive officer demonstrate how you destroy an airplane and create a fireball from which he ejects, and then the parachute comes down within sight of the flight deck, and the helicopter goes and picks him up. That was not part of the show, but it was a big show. When I had my air wing on the Saratoga in 76, 77 time frame, I had a firepower demo, and Jimmy Carter was the president, and he wanted his who was that guy? His money guy from the cabinet came out to see what Carrier was all about, and so my air wing put on a demonstration, and I didn't have any Marine squadrons in my air wing. My air wing they didn't do too good. I wasn't very happy with what I saw that day, but they got some Marine guys to come out in a Harrier and fire at some smoke lights beside the ship. And one of the Harriers fires his rockets, and he flew right into the water, right at the target. He didn't pull out. He went in. He didn't even blow up or anything. I mean, it was just like the water went through his engine, put it out, and there's puff out there, and he's gone. Mercilessly unforgiving of human error. The margin for mistakes there is very minimal. And aviators it's all volunteer work. You don't have to do this. You could turn your wings in. So if you get real scared, you get real doubtful about your ability to handle it, then you just can say, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And you don't have to keep doing it. All of the guys that got shot down in North Vietnam, they were all volunteers. And I saw fellow instructors back at 125 that just said when it was their time to go to war, they said, here's my wings, I'm not going. You believe that? So, to me, it'd be what your wife tells you, to a large degree. I'm going to just worry too much about you out there, and we're married to have kids, and we're not to be, so you're going to get out of the Navy, and that's all there is to it, and it starts right now, and that's what some guys did. When I was training junior officers, I was sitting in the ready room. They were getting a bunch of 6 or 8 of them were getting ready to go out and practice night carrier landings at the airfield, and they had to wait till it got dark. So they were sitting around in the ready room, and they were trying to figure out how to get out of going to war. A couple of them, and said, I'm not going to do it. But if I was going to do it, I just go out there to the ready room was up on a couple of decks above at the hangar, I just go out there and stumble off the stairs and break something on the way down, and I'd have a cast on and I wouldn't have to go. I actually saw some guys fall, get hurt, so they didn't have to go. Well, that just makes it easier for little Jerry Taylor to make Admiral.
I got to ask you some questions here. We've gone an hour and 24 minutes already, which is fine, but I got to get some questions in here.
Sure.
And try not to rock. You're starting to rock. You're okay.
Okay.
I'm going to focus on Vietnam right now.
Okay.
Because I do a lot of work with Vietnam veterans, but not many like what you've done. So when I mention Vietnam in the story, what am I going to put for an air wing, a group, a fighter squadron? What number squadron or group am I going to put during your Vietnam time? Or
okay.
What would you have? What do you want me to put down?
Pardon?
What group were you with during Vietnam?
Okay, I was with Attack Squadron 113, Attack 113, VA 113 out of Lemoore, flying the A4 Skyhawk and A4Cs on the first cruise, and A4Fs on the second. The Navy flew 2 cruises back to back with about a 6-month, 5-month turnaround period in between. The Air Force flew for 100 counters. Like they did in World War II, the B-17 guys flew 25, then 30 missions or whatever. Same for B-24 guys, I guess. Well, ours was, for the Air Force, was 100 counters, which was 100 over North Vietnam. There were some others that flew other places to beef them up. The Navy, you got about 100 on the first cruise, and then you got 6-month turnaround to meet your family and that, and you get another 100. My squadron was on Enterprise. I deployed in December of 1966 and returned in July of 1968. And then we went again the following Christmas and came back the following July. So I got 2 cruises of 6 months each in VA 113, then assigned to Air Wing 9, assigned to the USS Enterprise.
The Enterprise was still going from World War II?
No, this is the nuclear-powered carrier.
Okay.
Yeah, it came out in about 1962 time frame. The Enterprise was just for getting its first carrier landings, and Enterprise ended up being home based in Alameda and deploying to the Western Pacific.
Okay, realize I come from many helicopter stories, Hueys, the dust-offs, the Cobras, so they call them air assaults. Okay, so with a jet, are you flying, you said you're a TAC, you're not a fighter.
Right.
That was interesting.
Okay,
so tell me, I saw pictures of targets, you're in this, that. Tell me what you're doing in Vietnam for the Americans,
Yeah, there were the Rolling Thunder missions came down to 2 kinds of missions: multi-plane strikes on a big target, or armed recce interdiction missions along the roads and the paths on which the supplies went from the north to the south. And so you would get up in the morning and you would find out if you were on an alpha strike, which would be led by one of the senior pilots, either fighter or attack, and it would involve about 30 airplanes. Or you would be on a mini strike, where I led a lot of those with about 12 airplanes, but it'd all be light attack. It wouldn't be going where there were tremendous number of guns. There were lots of guns, but maybe no missiles, SAMs, no fighters. When you went up into the heartland, you carried the war to the heartland. You went at an alpha strike, which had supporting aircraft beefing up about a dozen attack airplanes that were to go after the target. The targets were bridges, military targets, the power plants, the oil supplies, and the rest of it. And they were all in close proximity to human beings. And so it had to be precision, and we were using dumb bombs, basically. The other mission, the armed recce, would be 2 or 4 airplanes would go out, and they would have a segment of North Vietnam to go look for a lucrative target and have a bridge somewhere as a backup. So you would take off and rendezvous over the ship or close to the ship. You would fly out a radial on your TACAN to 20,000 feet and then start an orbit, and your wingman would join up. And when the join up was complete, the leader would take off for the beach to go find the target. Okay. The pursuit of the navigation was easy, about 100 miles off the coast from the Gulf of Tonkin, Yankee Station, we called it. And you would have the recognition of the coastline at Cape Moiran or the Hourglass or whatever the geographic point was that you had charts for. I got a chart here if you want. But in any case, You would take expeditious navigation. You'd let the world know there's one tactical frequency. You'd say battle cry 1, feet dry, and then they knew you were over the beach, and you were over the beach till you battle cry rolling in. They would know you were in the target area, but rolling in hot, and then you would pursue out of there, and you would call battle cry battle cry 1, feet wet, and then you were back over the Gulf. And so you get about anywhere from 10 minutes to 45 minutes of time over the beach, depending on what the mission was and how far in it was and all of that. And then depending on how much shooting there was at you, you were shot at on every hop because everybody there carried a gun. But when you see the people in their rice paddies firing at airplanes, the lethality of their fire is 0 above a couple thousand feet. So the higher you get, the fewer guns have effectiveness for you. Also, I love to fly at night because the bad guys put a lot of tracer ammunition in their guns, so you knew where the fire was coming from and you could fly away from it. In the day, you didn't see it till it was popping all around you. And they had thousands and thousands of guns. Over time, when we first started out, there were in 66, 65 and 66, there were about a third of the number of guns that were there by the time 68 rolled around. The SAMs the same way. They started with a couple of SAM sites, and we weren't allowed to attack SAM sites. They started that in mid '67. We had carte blanche to hit airfields and finally go after the airfields and the SAM sites. And so when we flew an alpha strike of 30 airplanes, there were about a dozen of them that were not going to hit a target at all. They were going to go after the defenses, either to counter the SAMs with our radiation missiles that would zero in on their radar, or with CBUs, bomblets that spread out all over everywhere. Basically a personnel kill weapon, but you could cover a wide area with it, which is what a SAM site is. It's a wide area with 3 or 4 missiles or maybe 6 missiles in it and a radar van, and it's a spectacular target. But of course, when you go against them, it's like a Mexican standoff because they got you on radar, they know where you are, and they know you're flying straight at them, so you are the target. And then in my case, the bullpup was my favorite weapon, and that was a steerable weapon from the cockpit, and you'd put it in the air up around 12,000 feet, and then you would steer it all the way till it impacted. It had a parasite flare on the back of the missile, and you gave it right and left, up and down commands, and it would correct so between your eyeball, the parasite light flare on the missile, and the target, you finally had some precision to what you were delivering. And I loved firing the bullpup. I fired a couple of dozen of them at least, and I enjoyed every one of them because you see the target. I don't think it made the attack any safer because when you're jockeying to drop a bomb, let me get back to that. When we went with an alpha strike, you'd have a division integrity, and you'd have one division coming in this angle, one coming in here, and you'd all try to take advantage of the silence that might be provided by some of these flak suppressors that you took with you. I never counted on a flak suppressor to do anything, but sometimes they really did a good job. I could tell that, for instance, one of the flights I had, I briefed F4 guys were going along with my 8 attack airplanes, and we went for a bridge at Dong Fong Thong, and the 4 F4s were going for the flak sites closest to the bridge. And I had them roll in just ahead of me, and I watched when they rolled in, and this flak site, you could see the muzzle flashes down there, and then you see this 37 millimeter, the little white puffs around, and you see those guys fly right down to go get them. And as soon as they rolled in, they stopped shooting, and they went for cover, and these guys put their bombs right on the target, and they pulled out. As I'm rolling in, I got this little window where they got their heads down there, and now my guys can wipe out this bridge, so we put all our bombs on the bridge. And I turned to go out, and I look back, and they're firing again. So the flak suppression was good. They knew how to handle it. They knew the best of the flak suppressors was just a temporary fix. And the other thing was, if you went to a real big bad target like the Fanwa Bridge, there was no way you could suppress the flak because they had 30 flak sites down there. And a flak site is not one gun, it's a set of guns. And they're radar controlled. So the radar van has got control over these muzzles, and they'll pick out an airplane or a spot in the sky for barraging. But the track and fire is pretty stiff stuff. They'll pick out an airplane and throw up all the 8 barrels, will bang, 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 bang. And so 8 times all that coming up to get that airplane. And it's they're coming from different angles, so sometimes you didn't see it. Rarely did only occasionally were they coming straight at me. But I did have to duck I had a mission where I had the SAM site SAM site number 82 was about 30 miles west of Hanoi. And on May 18, or thereabouts, 1867, this SAM site, the 2 SAM sites out here, shot down one of our Enterprise F4s and one of our A6s who were on their way to a target on the south edge of Hanoi, the Van Yen vehicle repair shop or whatever, bicycle shop we called it. In any case, they 2 aircraft were down, and the pilots became 2 of them were killed, or in the F4 were killed, and the A6 guys were on the ground, and one of them never got rescued. There was big stories on that. But in any case, we were going to the air wing got all splattered up, and they held it up with all the missiles coming out of these 2 sites. They all went diverted from the mission because they had been chewed up. And so we had to go back and get it a couple days later. Well, little Jerry Taylor and his wingmen are assigned one of these radars, these SAM sites. And we were to go in and distract them so the air wing could fly by, because we knew these were real shooters here. So that was one of my most memorable missions, because I had two small bullpups, and I put the first one into the radar van, and then I came around and I put the next one in there, and I flew so low I saw guys running on the ground, which is real low. I had probably misread my altimeter, but at that point I was fearless. I mean, I'd been so uptight and I knew what my mission was. I would just have to keep these guys busy, causing as much destruction. The second missile hit a second bullpup hit a missile that twirled on the ground, and it was spectacular. And then I got out of there, and my wingman, he hit after me, but in the process, he said, "There's a missile coming at you," but I'm driving my missile. Went right over my cockpit. So they said, one of my buddies said, "How close was it?" It said, it said, "To Jer from Ho Chi Minh." I could read it right on the missile. Ho, ho, ho. Any case, when I got back from that mission and a few others that were like that, the cheeks on my ass were trembling. And and if you hold your brakes on the car or something for a long time, you hold a muscle and then you let off one, it quivers, and that's the way the body was when you came back. Your mouth is dry. You can't believe how, as you go feet wet, your mouth goes dry. And you just get ready to see what kind of man you are and what kind of warrior you are. And I always felt like one of those guys from World War II rolling in on one of the Japanese carriers. You know, dive bombing is a special trade. Subsequently, I had duty that led me to the Pentagon, where eventually I was the director of aviation plans and requirements as a 2-star.
2-star general?
A 2-star admiral.
Admiral.
And rear admiral upper half it was as I retired. But I had the duty there of during the Desert Storm time frame. 1990, 91 time frame, we were in Asia. We were still dropping dumb bombs. And we had to find a way to update things. So it was my job to wrestle around and to see if I was highly motivated to do that. And I found people that needed to be talked to. I found money in the Air Force that the Navy wouldn't let me put there to put a smart weapon on. We had walleye and bullpup and a couple of things and the Air Force had everything that was laser guided. So we had some really smart weapons up and through the Desert Storm time frame, but it wasn't what we really needed. Well, I've just about, as I didn't do this by myself, you understand.
Right.
There's ordnance labs at Eglin Air Force Base and China Lake Navy Air Force. And these guys they're geniuses. And what they don't have, what they lack is, if it isn't invented here, I don't want anything to do with it. So what it takes is somebody to say, you guys are geniuses, work together. And so that was my job, along with my Air Force counterpart, General Rollins. Joe Rollins, yeah. Joe Rollins was the comparable 2-star for the Air Force. And he and I got together in 1990 and said, we got to come up with a smarter weapon. And the Navy was playing around with inertially aided munitions and developing two bombs to replace the Mark 80 series of Mark 82 was a 500-pounder, and 81 of 250, and 83 and 84 were bigger ones. But in any case, they were dumb. And what we needed was something that was going to guide them into the target so that we could ensure we weren't killing people that didn't need killing. So I took this the inertially aided munitions, logically tie it to the satellites. So that what we ended up doing, Air Force, Joe Rollins and me, and a couple of staffers in the Senate who found the money, and Joe and I convinced them to put all this money together to finish this inertially aided munitions for the advanced bomb family and the advanced interdiction weapon system, and they became JDAM and JSAL, a joint program. Everybody in Washington loves it if you go joint, and they'll put money on it. And for me in the Navy, this overcame Navy effort to squash this, because this would make the aviators, this would keep the aviators in business. People don't realize that everybody's got his own breakfast, you know, and they don't want to share. And they want a piece of the pie over here. And if it means you don't get your money, they'll take it for whatever, ships and submarines. It's going to be internal argument for money, to the point where every time I had that job for 3.5 years. Every time I put money on a program that the surface guys didn't want, that would save pilots' lives and the rest, they said, well, no, we can use it. We'll just spend it on more Tomahawks. Because so there's an inter-service, in-service, as well as inter-service. So in any case, with the Senate Armed Services Committee on my side, John Hambry and Skip Ringo and Joe Rollins, we ended up with a package that got everything together, and there was momentum coming out of Desert Storm by the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. You got to come up with something. He takes full credit for it, but we'd already had this on the road for a year and a half, and what we produced was what you know now as JDAM and JSOW, which had virtually put tactical aviation in a deep bind because JDAM now goes on small diameter bombs and gets tied to drones, and the drones go do the bombing, and the pilot sits out here and hopes that they'll give him control of drones so he can do but the pilots don't get that. Same thing with you asked about, we went into the carrier landing in the old days where you had to check your airspeed or your angle of attack and the rest of that. I was in 1987, I got my last carrier landings in the F-18. Well, it had automatic throttle, and it had a box in the airplane that talked to a box on the ship that flew a smoother landing than I ever could. That's where, so when you look at the deck moving and all the rest of that today, the pilot has no problem whatsoever as long as all his gear's working. That's the problem. What if it isn't working? Then you got to go back to manual and put the man in the loop. So I was always a little leery of it, but now things are so automatic, and the JDAM thing, our bombs are guided as if a car was on listening to Bitch and Betty on the quarter mile. You're going to turn right, and so the same thing is happening between the airplane, the bomb, so it hits the target. You just dial in the coordinates down to the nitty-gritty that you want, and you fly into that area. You're 20 miles away, and if you drop it from high enough, it'll create its own energy, sizzling through. It's the same dumb bomb, Mark 80 series. But now it's got a brain, and it's got controls back there, and it'll hit within a few feet of the target.
In Vietnam, I got to ask you some questions here, okay? During your tour in Vietnam or your tours, obviously you lost people.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen their names on the wall in Washington?
Oh yeah. That going to the wall is, the first time, it's a magnificent memorial, absolutely. And when you stand there and you look at the name on the wall, I defy anybody not being affected. Because when you're in a combat outfit, you're brothers, and you share everything, and you're as close as people can be without sharing the same genes. And when you lose them, it could be you. And so, since it wasn't, you have an obligation to remember him. One of the pilots that went down on my squadron was Jim Graham. He was going after a target near Than Hoa, and he got nailed, and unfortunately, he was going after a SAM site that was located next to a village, and his parachute came down in the village. So the people down there weren't happy to see him. That's the last we saw of Jim. He was waving in his parachute on the way down. He didn't show up as a POW. So many years later, in 1980, one of my Washington tours, they recovered Jim's body, and they were having a funeral near Philadelphia.
Okay.
And 13 members of the squadron, when Jim was there, showed up for the funeral. Wow. And it was the service was at Valley Forge.
Wow.
Valley Forge has a great monument. I hope they still have it out there, of a big rock full of melted prisoner of war bracelets that were worn during the war. And so we had a little ceremony out there by the rock, and then we went into chapel, and then we went to the graveyard where Jim's buried, and then we went to the home, Jim family home, and they had a family portrait of Jim, and he got the Silver Star for that mission because he'd been hit and he bombed anyway. I was the awards officer, so I get to write it up. In any case, they had his Silver Star and his picture there, and then I just told the guys, there were two of us were admirals in that group at that point, and many were retired junior officers. We all told a Jim Graham story, and the family and the neighbors who had never known Jim, but other than what the family had told them, they all said how much they appreciated sharing our stories about Jim in his last days in the ship. And that's the way it was with all the guys that got lost. So later on, when I get to go to the wall with Pat, and I'm standing there, I can't take it anymore. I just back off, as I've heard so many of the guys on your network say, back off on the grass and go over there and just get your breath. And I just sat down on the grass, and then some guy, I don't know what he's just a veteran doing his job, I guess, said, "Hey, sir, you have to get off the grass." I said, "Over my dead body, I'll get off it when I get able to walk." Yeah, that wall is, today it's run by a magnificent American personality that keeps it alive, and his tales of, and I always refer to the wall and the talk, the ability to go in and leave a comment for somebody that said, "Jim, I've been thinking about you for the last couple of years, and want you to know the world's going to hell in a handbasket, but nevertheless, I wish you were here." You get a chance to do that, and you have an obligation to do that, to help the family remember who it was and what a great sacrifice. And in my case, I was those days are 59 years behind me. And if I'd have been back, I wouldn't have had this 59 years of incredible life and success and adventure. My goodness gracious, to go on and command an air wing, a squadron, an air wing, a deep draft oiler for a couple of years, and then an aircraft carrier for a couple of years. A lot of Washington duty in there, but it was okay, because once you do the apprentice tour, the first tour, then you do the journeyman tour. By the third tour, you understand what's going on in there, and you can have a little effect. And so I enjoyed the Washington duty, and it gave me a big edge for promotion, because a lot of people, aviators particularly, they want to stay out there and fly.
Yeah.
But I figured out how to fly and get over 6,000 hours of flight time and fly all the airplanes, including F-18. But then I worked a deal with Joe Ralston. I think I called him Rollo, but Joe Ralston was the general. I worked a deal with Joe. He could go fly the F-14 if he'd fix me up with an F-15 flight down out of Eglin Air Force Base with the fighters down there, the strike fighters, and Strike Eagle, I think they call it. And then one of the last flights I had in the military was out of, it was the same weekend as the tailhook convention that got the Navy in trouble. I was there, but I bailed out early and went down to fly with the Air Force at Edwards, and I flew the F-15 and the Air Force F-16. So I got to fly F-14, F-18, F-16, F-15. I mean, that's at the top of the guide. And I started with this flying the SNJ, which is World War II, with T-28s, and came through all of that, went to war, then get command, lead troops in battle. Hey, bring them all home. I never lost a wingman. None of my airplanes got shot. Pay attention. I got you through here because I got this great navigator with me right here. He's never going away. He's still here today. He's trying to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing to be a good human being.
And that's God.
Absolutely.
Tell me how you got that nickname Bear.
Well, to the disagreement of the mothers of the world, the ready room or the locker room or wherever you go through as a youngster, somewhere in there you're going to pick up a nickname, or two or three or four. One will stick. I didn't have a nickname other than Jerry. I was christened Jeremy, which was, in those days, I'm probably the oldest living Jeremy right now, because it got more popular when Jeremy and Chad were singing music. But in any case, nobody ever called me Jeremy. Then, in fact, for this evolution here, there were people, if you don't identify me as Bear, they'll never figure out who I was. So in any case, that was, I attribute that to my squadron mates in my first squadron flying off the Shangri-La and the Roosevelt when Yogi Bear was popular in those days, and one of the guys referred to me as Jer Bear, smarter than the average bear, and he sang it, so that I became Jer Bear. And at some point they rounded that off, put it on my coffee cup, Bear. And first thing you know, it's on my airplane, it's everywhere, and nobody knows me by any other name than Bear. And I can tell you, I'm proud of it. You can get stuck with any one of a bunch of lousy nicknames. There seems to be in these days and age a penchant for figuring out something really gross to hang on a guy for his whole life. And I've always objected to that. When I had command of all the attack pilots in the Pacific Fleet, when I was flying the F-18 in 87, early 88, my last flying tour, except for what I bagged while I was in the Pentagon, the nicknames came to my attention in my command, and I had to take some corrective action because they were hanging names on that didn't go well as in the public, because we had been pretty well framed and attacked from the whole world for our behavior at the Tailhook Convention in Las Vegas in 1991. That was 1990. Which one was it? 91, I think. In any case, it was, no, it was 90. 90 was the bad one. By 91, we kind of recovered.
So you were in the rank in the Navy, are you an Admiral, then you're a 1-star, then you're a 2-star?
Yeah.
Okay, like in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have a Rear Admiral friend in the Coast Guard, Jill Bozzella.
Yeah, I made it in 1984, and the Navy has always been able to outfox the Air Force and the Army by not having a 1-star. They went from a captain or an 06 captain to an 07, but he was an admiral, and so everywhere there was a joint staff, he would have an advantage on the 07s. So, in any case, that all came to a head in 1984, and the Navy was forced into returning to, instead of a Rear Admiral lower half and Rear Admiral upper half, or just plain Rear Admiral, both 1 and 2 stars, they had to come up with a name for the 1-star. And instead of going with the way the Air Force and others do as Brigadier General for a 1-star, they started out with a Commodore General, a Commodore Admiral, except they rounded it off and just made. So when I put my flag, I became a flag officer in '84. I was a Commodore.
What does that mean, flag officer?
That's the flag officers, just flag rank. It's the generals and the admirals of the world are all flag officers. They have their own flag.
Okay. Oh,
I had a 1-star flag. Now I have a 2-star flag. I don't show anywhere around, of course. Everywhere I went, they would put up a 2-star flag. And when I visited when I had my last command out of Washington, 87, early 88, for a year and a half, I also had the bases at Alameda, Fallon, Nevada, and Lemoore, California, for administrative purposes. And so I had people working for me there. I had to go visit every once in a while. And everywhere I went, they put up my 2-star flag. And I had a driver and I had an aide. I always told my aide, go down and go flying. I don't need any assistance here. But I will say that it's good to have a little staff to save your butt when you're as reckless as I am.
So you never made 3-star?
No, I didn't.
Now, correct me now. 2-star Navy, you are considered a Rear Admiral.
Rear Admiral, upper half.
Okay, so you are a Rear. I know 2 Rear.
So I'm a Rear Admiral, and you can round it off to Admiral, and they don't mind that.
Okay.
But it's
and you commanded the F-18s in the Pacific for how long? 2 years?
A year and a half. Yeah,
these were all the pilots. You were what were you called? The commander?
Yeah, I was Commander Light Attack Wing Pacific Fleet.
Commander Light Attack.
Strike Fighter Wing Pacific Fleet.
Was that one of your highest positions?
Out of that, that's my last command, and I was because I did the apprentice, journeyman, master tours. I went into my first Pentagon duty after my Air Wing command as in the what kind of systems analysis was the business.
Okay.
So I got the systems analysis box filled, and I represented the fleet ops and working on the CNO staff. The next time in was after I made flag. I went in as, I went out and I had my oiler. I had command of, and the Navy gives you, the aviators, a chance to practice being a captain of a ship. All the carriers are commanded by aviators.
Okay.
That's because Billy Mitchell sunk a battleship. Billy Mitchell in 1926 testified, if you give command of air-capable ships to surface guys, you won't get the full application of the capability. So you got to give them. So ever since 1926, carriers are commanded by aviators. So you have to take an aviator who's been in the business of flying and doing the rest of that. But in order to get him to handle a carrier, which is a national asset, you better give him another ship to make sure he knows where the mud and the rocks are and other ships, so he knows how to handle a ship before he handles a carrier. So I got the best of both worlds. I got all that flying time, man over machine. Then they gave me a big machine that went to sea and 400 sailors to have fun with. And then after that, I came back to Washington and I did a job as a programmer.
Right.
And nobody wants those jobs, but I was the deputy to the head Navy programmer, and I got out of there to get a carrier, and I got the Carl C for 2 years, and I took it around the world, for heaven's sakes. I just had a ball. The best job's being an air wing commander. Next best is command of a carrier, but command of a carrier is like what LBJ said. It's splendid misery, because the responsibilities are just endless and they're persistent. I mean, everything that happens in your little city afloat, and you're a war machine. You got to worry about you got an admiral riding your ship too. But in any case,
I got to get this in before we're done.
Okay.
Tell me about your last flight, and did you know it was your last flight?
The last flight was with an F-15, like I said, was flying an F-15.
Was it just a fun flight, routine flight?
No, I was Joe Ralston of the Air Force, and Lockheed Martin had asked me to go take a look at their IR systems and their laser-guided weapon systems.
This is your last flight?
Yeah, and so after a tailhook disaster, when I skipped out, I wanted to go down to Eglin and fly. It was an F-15 at night with a young major who took me out into the Panamint Valley and over the Sierras and all around, and then brought me back to Eglin, where I delivered ordnance.
So you weren't flying that?
I was sitting in the back seat, which is equipped with the stick and all of that. So he flew the airplane to show me I was out there to look at the weapons delivery system, which I wanted to move over into our fighters, the F-14.
But this wasn't your last flight. Technically your last flight, was it?
Oh yeah, it's the last one in my logbook.
So was it emotional when you landed?
No, I don't get emotional after flying. In fact, a lot of guys have asked why I don't have an airplane, and I was the airport manager here for 9 years, and so if I wanted to go fly, I could go fly. But it's over, man. You gotta. You realize.
How do you know it's over?
Well, you're a young man. Go ask the former Green Bay quarterback who put on a demonstration last night for Pittsburgh how he feels about his last hop. That's the same way you reach a point where you're not the same anymore. And what kind of memories do you want to go to your retirement with? There's a guy who's he's a Hall of Famer, and his last ball game is a complete disaster. He's got to live with that forever, which is a tragedy, personal.
Yeah.
Well, I just didn't. I had enough. 6,000 hours of flight time for a guy that got commands of a couple of ships, led troops all his time. I have 34 years, 36 years in the Navy, almost 37, and I had 8 years as a flag officer, an admiral, commodore, and an admiral, and I had the best jobs. I led troops all the way through. I was a warrior, which is the highest title you can possibly have. And now I've spent my time with my blog, paying back to all those guys that I flew with and remember. There aren't many guys that know about Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder, what's that? That's motorcycle guys going to Washington to celebrate the relief of POWs and stuff. No, Rolling Thunder happened long before Rolling Thunder was on a motorcycle. It happened in North Vietnam. We were the only warriors who carried the war to North Vietnam. We were a chip, a blue chip for the entire time we were up there. 43.5 years of Rolling Thunder, 3.5 years of Commando Hunt, and we were laying down lives and losing airplanes, and we were there for one reason, to give our peace talkers something to give up. If you'll come talk, we'll stop bombing you. That was it. Everybody all the old men that sent us out there to die in the war, all the old men that were out there making the decisions, they later on wrote books. You know what they said in their books? It was a mistake. They all said, in retrospect, McNamara, he wrote down 15 things reason why we shouldn't have been there. Well, he knew that while we were there. And when we were there, we knew that if you really want to win, you got to pound them. You can't tickle them. You got to pound them. You got to make them pay. The way we did in Desert Storm. We waited until we had a force of 500,000 people over there, and then we went after them, and after 100 hours, they were in such turmoil, the enemy quit. Too bad, because we didn't follow them and finish them, so we had to go back later on and get Saddam Hussein on a different war. That's stupid. Stupid to back out when you got them beat. You just don't back out of there. You go get them. Well, that's American. We can't win a war if you're not going to kill. That's what you have to decide. How much blood do you want to spill? You could get tied up like they are in Iran and or in Ukraine and with the Russians, and just see Russia's failed in that now they're bombing the people of Kiev, and they aren't going after military targets. They're going after people. They're trying to make the point: we're going to keep at it till we break your will to resist. And in 1968, we had the power between the Air Force and the Navy of pounding the way we did for linebacker years later, 1972, 73. We could have done that in 68. You know how many men died in South Vietnam fighting the war between 1968 and 1972? 40,000. We lost 58,400 guys that are on the wall, and 40,000 of them were died fighting a war down there. Everybody knew was unwinnable. That was all while there were peace talks going in. And so the old men that started the war just kept on bombing and bombing and bombing, hoping that would change the behavior. And so today, we are led by people who think if you bomb them, they'll change their behavior. They don't. That's what Putin's finding out. You can bomb and bomb and bomb. You're not going to change the behavior. We ousted Maduro. Good luck on changing the behavior down in Venezuela. You're going to probably have to go in and do some more bombing. But is it going to work? It isn't going to work unless you put troops on the ground behind it to go in and to take it over. So that's what, all these lessons, that's why my Rolling Thunder Remembered is there. It is a tribute particularly to the 40,000 guys that died while we were waiting for peace. And it could have been ended a lot earlier with a good slap in the nose. They would have forced them all, and we didn't want to do it. One of the jobs, I went back out for another tour in Vietnam, incidentally. I was a staffer for a year living at Yankee Station on 3 different carriers. I was an airstrike plans officer. One of my responsibilities was the mine plan that we mined Haiphong and other ports there. I was responsible for keeping that up to date during my year out there, 1970, 71. Among other things, I had the daily airplane. It wasn't much of a war for Commando Hunt. Was basically 7 campaigns. 1, 3, 5, and 7 were bombing on the Laos side of the mountains, and the other 3 were bombing both north of the mountains and south of the mountains. So it was a great follow-on tour, with not very rewarding for the pilots. We didn't go up north very often except for protective reaction strikes, and they were few and far between. So eventually Nixon and Kissinger just decided, well, I guess we better let loose the cannons and really pound them down, and maybe that'll change their mind. Well, it did. It did change their minds long enough for us to get out gracefully before they broke the promises, and both Kissinger and America broke the promises to South Vietnam guys, and North Vietnam broke their promises and went after South Vietnam. And today, the president will go over and do duty with the people of South Vietnam as the Republic of Vietnam, one country, one people, all enjoying peace. And we got a whole lot of Vietnamese here, and in fact, my wife is enjoying their company once a month when she gets her nails done. It's awesome to have had the opportunity to live a long life in exciting times we've lived in, and they're getting more exciting every day right now for the new generations to figure out what to do. But I would just wish that more of them would study history, more of them would go back and see all the lessons that have been learned. Our society has been dumbed down to the point where we have useful idiots in great numbers. Useful idiots who are very comfortable with opening the gates for letting in anybody and everybody so they can somehow change the country to something they have in mind, which is unattainable. And we just don't have the will to be what we have to be because we've strayed from godly guidance to something else. And I just thank the good Lord for being my navigator. Somebody wrote a book, God is my co-pilot. No, he's my navigator. He's ready right there to tell me, go this way, go that way. And I tried to be a good person and somebody my mother would kind of appreciate, even though I'm called Bear instead of Jeremy. I sure have had fun, Larry. I tell you what, I've just been so blessed with being able to lead troops, guide them, do things like this. I had a captain's mast on. You got time for this?
Yes.
I had a captain's mast on Carl C. while I was in the shipyard in Portsmouth after I took it around the world, which is a real treat also to command a ship on an around the world cruise. That doesn't happen often. You know, everywhere, the Straits of Malacca and the Sea of Japan and the China Sea and on through the Indian Ocean, the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, the Caribbean. In fact, on our last month, we were doing in the Caribbean what they're doing down there with the carrier right now, but we were standing between Nicaragua and Cuba to cut off the arms supply for a month. But in any case, what a great life I've had at commanding troops and ships and airplanes, and I had in the shipyard. I had an opportunity as a part of leading the troops. You're the judge and jury too. So while I was a JO, I stood there and I told you that story about the Billy Wheaton. He had the animal, but then later on when I had command of my ships, I had to discipline my troops and I could give away 3 days on bread and water was the worst I could do. I did that a couple of times. But in any case, I had a really, he looked like a Herschel Walker. He was born to be a halfback for some pro team. But he was standing in front of me at captain's mast, and I got the XO and the chaplain here and the doctors here and his division officers over here and the chiefs are here, and then there's a group waiting to come in for captain's mast out there, can hear the whole thing around the corner. And in comes this Airman Brown. And I had to put the jacket in front of me, and I go through the jacket while he's standing there, and I said, you're charged with not showing up to work a couple of days here, late. I said, well, Chief, what's the problem? Well, he says, well, he's a good sailor, but just all of a sudden, he's tardy. He decides to come to work when he wants to. So that's why he's on he's on report. I said he's never been the captain's mast before. He's got a nice clean record here, and I go a little deeper. Holy mackerel! Wait, look at this. He's never had a mother and a father.
Yeah.
It's in his record. He's a foster home guy. How many foster homes you live in, Brown? He says 6 or 7. I said, well, you did good getting in the Navy. I said, we're going to fix that right up. I said, but you got to come to work. And Chief, what kind of work's he do when he comes? He's a great sailor, sir. he just all of a sudden he's lost his guide. I said, Brown, do you hear that? I thought, the chief says you're a good worker. Did he ever tell you that? No, sir. I said, Chief, you got to give them a stroke when they're stroking, man. So I said, everybody's listening now because I'm on the chief as much as I am on Brown. I said to Brown, Brown, anybody ever tell you they need you? He said, no, sir. I said, Chief, do you need him? Yes, sir, I need him. Brown, did anybody ever tell you they want you? He said, no, sir, nobody ever told me they want me. Chief, I want him, Captain. I said, Brown, anybody ever tell you they love you? No, sir. Chief, I'm not going to ask you to love Brown, but I'm going to ask you two guys to go back to work. Get out of here. I don't want to see you again. That's the kind of life you lead when you're leading troops. You get in there and you touch their heart because that's where it is. And I just so thoroughly enjoyed leading, man, and leading them in battle and bringing them all home. It was a great honor and privilege to lead American sailors. And some of them come by here to see me every once in a while.
How beautiful.
I got a truck driver from Pensacola who asked for all the runs to Portsmouth, to Oregon and Washington so he can come by and I can buy him breakfast. He was here last week. And he sent me a movie he wants me to look at. He's over the years, he's been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, a trip or two a year. And other guys, there's a couple other people particularly from the Carl C, which is a great fraternity of really good sailors. I may leap on a few people for the VA benefits and all of that, but in my heart, I know that there's nobody that earned them more than the guys that put that uniform on and went out and took their chances.
Yeah.
And of all the guys that went out to take their chances and came home, I'm like Lou Gehrig. I'm the luckiest man alive.
2 more questions. And then what I want to do, you wanted to show me some items over there?
Yeah, well, that's just a little...
Well, here's what I want to do. I've got so much time left on my card, but I want to finish 2 more questions here, okay?
Yeah.
Then we could do that, but I want to go in that other room because I want to sit next to you and do a short little interview with me talking to you.
Okay.
That's going to be, I do that sometimes at the end of my interview, so we'll do that. But 2 more questions here and then we'll go in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, over here...
Just a second. Let me ask you the 2 questions first. 2 more questions to end this segment, okay? I ask all my veterans this from day one. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first question is, Jerry, tell me what freedom means to you.
Individualism. I can do what I want. I got a sweatshirt that says I'm an old veteran. I do what I want. Because inside the freedom are other rules that, like the golden rule, which is the most important of all the commandments, I think. And that's, I always laid that on my sailors. So freedom means you do what you want to do and you have choices, unlimited choices. And that nobody has benefited more than I have from that. I had opportunities presented. What kind? Freedom is opportunities. And then it's up to you what you do with them. So you're free to go do it. That's what freedom is. It's live free or die.
Tell me what the American flag means and represents to you.
Well, it's our symbol of unity, which is supposed to draw all of us together to share one national symbol and appreciate the fact that we are a nation of Christians and Jews and some Islamics, but you have to, it means this is our country. And when other people wave their other flags, that's their country. But you have to pick. You have to choose. That's what freedom is. You're free to choose. And if you choose one of those other flags, go live where that flag flies. So I'm not. I don't think you ought to be burning flags. I know that the Second Amendment allows you to do some things that don't make any sense at all. And it's useful idiots that are doing that, are driving us toward communism, which I spent my life resisting in the Cold War, and everything else has been to resist communism. Now we have people who are embracing it. From the mayor of New York, it's very discouraging for an old guy to see that what his legacy is a lot less than what I had in mind. But I don't get to choose. It's God's will be done. So this is God's will. What did we do wrong, God? Well, you ain't seen the worst of it yet. Wait till you see what AI intelligence, artificial intelligence, does to our population of hedonistic people who have lacked the guidance they get from the Bible and the people and that I grew up with. Yeah, I was an acolyte in my youth. I got to carry the cross one time as a part of my acolyte training, and onward Christian soldiers going as to war. I were one of them. And he was there. And I said, God, get me out of this. You better hit the target first, buddy. God, get me aboard. I get aboard. Are you going to say thank you? Yeah. Thank you, Jesus. You got to talk to him because he's there. I'm not a religious guy, I don't think. I just know that there's some being out there that has protected me and guided me, everybody. Yeah. And that's what our country lacks now. You can see it. Just we're falling away from the bones. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what freedom, that's what the flag are.
And one last thing. Well, two things actually. On your head, what's it going to say on your headstone someday?
Duty done, glory gained, duty done.
Glory came.
Glory gained.
Gained.
Duty done.
Okay.
That would be as good a tribute. There's a poem out that uses that line. I don't know that it even has a name, but that's out of the poem. It's a glory gained and duty done.
I like it.
I have good ancestry. We didn't talk about that, but I have a responsibility to have carried on the duty of my forebears, who included the Dr. Thomas Hooker, who was a Massachusetts Puritan who established the state of Connecticut and wrote the Constitution for Connecticut. That's Dr. Thomas Hooker. But my favorite relative is Private Isaiah T. Enders, who was in the Pennsylvania militia.
Okay.
And Lee was coming across to attack Harrisburg, and so he was called up to defend Harrisburg. But Lee never got to Harrisburg, and he only got to Gettysburg. So they took the outfit that my great-great-great-grandfather was in, Isaiah T. Enders, and they sent them down to clean up the battlefield at Gettysburg. And for a month of July and August of '63, it was a stench, and dead horses and bodies and parts and all kinds of things around. And he spent the period down there cleaning up the battlefield. And after cleaning up the battlefield, he signed up for 3 years with the Pennsylvania Cavalry, and Out of that, he ended up in the Union's 9th Cavalry, and he fought out in with Sherman out in Tennessee, and then down into Atlanta, and out to Savannah, and up through the swamps into North Carolina. And even though the war was over really in April, they kept fighting where he was into July, and so he finished up the war in July of '65 and went home to Pennsylvania, and he was spent the rest of his life taking care of the poor. And there's an inspirational guy if ever there was one. So, as good as my life has been, I got to say, I got some of the ancestors that go well beyond me. How would you go in there and clean up a battlefield reeking with death, and then go out and get 3 more years? But one thing about it is also, he freed more slaves than anybody else in my family. Okay. That whole swing through Georgia was to free slaves, to turn them loose. Yep.
Well, here's what I want to ask you.
Okay.
2 questions. What do you think of the Blue Angels?
Great. I mean, that's the epitome of flying, and not counting combat. But the Blues are well worth the show everywhere. It's very important to the Navy that they get a chance to put that show on. The pilots that are flying those are not any more exceptional than the rest of the pilots. They have good records, and they like that kind of formation flying. I didn't like sticking in there and letting somebody else fly me around close to the ground, particularly.
You could have been a Blue Angel.
No.
Come on.
I don't think so. I think I didn't have the spit and polish about me that they have to demonstrate continuously. Furthermore, career-wise, it may not be a good idea. I got some advice when I was a junior officer that said you want to be 3 places. You want to be in the cockpit with the operating forces, which is the Blues are a cockpit, so you're not going to get hurt there. Or you want to be in school, or you want to be working for an admiral. Because if you work for an admiral and you do a good job, he'll get you your next job, which will be back in the cockpit or up on the bridge of the ship.
Let me ask you, what does it mean? I have a World War II pilot who was flying, he was actually up in the air when Pearl Harbor was attacked. Jack Lemming, he came and saw the end of the second wave flying an SBD bomber, World War II. And on his headstone, it says, nose down, flaps up, fly west. You ever hear that?
Yeah.
Is that? Where'd that come from?
Well, I don't know, but fly west is when you're all done.
But nose down, flaps up, is that right?
Yeah.
Did I say that right? And then fly west.
It sounds right. I don't know that I ever heard it. I certainly hear fly west all the time because that's what all my old friends are doing right now, flying west.
History is best learned from those who were there, and I want the real people. And I told Jerry that just down the road in Roy, Utah, I interviewed Lloyd Lewis in 2005, in August 2005, and I told you he lost his twin brother on Iwo Jima by an explosion. But so Utah's it's not new to me. I've been here many, many years. I've been on the local Fox television, and Salt Lake Tribune has featured a lot of the work I've done. So, and I'm finishing my memoirs. 700-page memoir. Would you like to get a copy of that when it's done?
I'll as soon as I can pay for it.
You can. You'll be fine. We'll get you a book, but it's going to be great. I'm really excited about that. But I've lost so many veterans, Jerry, and that's where it's very, very bittersweet for me. I've lost so many of my veterans. Most of my World War II and Korean veterans are gone, and I want you to live longer.
Yeah, but you see, you've given them a permanent page in history. Good on you, man.
Okay. I've never heard it like that, but I like that. That's good.
We'll be gone, but not forgotten.
My documentary series is called Lest They Be Forgotten. If we don't remember, we're going to forget.
That's exactly right. That's that's the first duty of a veteran, and that's why we spend so much time remembering the old, because we're remembering guys who died for whatever cause we were sent to fight for, and the promise to the dead is that we will carry your memory on.
Amen.
And you are a great collector of the truth and the history, which, as you point out, we can only hope that the people today will go to that laboratory and study history in the books that are there, and the opportunity to just listen to stories that history is the teacher.
Yes.
And history is the laboratory for military officers. And all the lessons are in there. And for goodness sakes, why do we have to keep relearning the same ones?
That's right. If we don't remember from our past, we're condemned to repeat the same mistakes. If we don't remember from our history back. I've got a pin I want to give you, so don't move.
Okay.
Don't move.
I'm going to be pinned.
When I started my work over 20 years ago, I had a commemorative pin made for me. It says, "Lest they be forgotten," with dog tags on there. So I'm going to give this to you. I usually give this to World War II veterans, but they're all gone, pretty much. So
Pretty much.
you know what? Let me tell you something sobering. Most of the Vietnam veterans today are the same age as the World War II veterans were when I started my work 23 years ago in Arizona. They're in their late 70s, early 80s. Now you're older than that, but still most of them are about that age right now. So
They were my heroes.
I don't need to pin that on you, but I want to give that to you. I don't know if you can see it, but it's got a little. It says, "Lest they be forgotten," and it's got dog tags. It's a very nice commemorative.
It is. It's very.
I bury some of my veterans with that too. So
Thank you kindly. I'll put it on. I got to look for some place to put it.
You'll find a place.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to shake your hand on camera and say, God bless you. Thank you for your service. You shared some things with me today I haven't heard in 25 years with all the work I've done.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for including me in the program. It's a great honor for me as a old warrior out to pasture to be heard of again. And let me give a little commercial for my blog, Rolling Thunder Remembered. It's as good a history of the Vietnam War from 1966 to 1968 as you're ever going to read, I think. But I thoroughly enjoyed this experience with you as a remembered guy that joins a cadre of over 1,000 other guys you've talked to that become a matter of permanent record for all of history.
That's right. A history, a legacy.
Larry, I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I've really enjoyed it.
God bless you, brother. Yes, sir.